Due to my preparations for the Tough Mudder, my workouts had gotten kind of intense, which meant I sweated a lot. And because of that, I didn't want to take the elevator. And when I had to climb the stairs, I had to, of course, pass by it once I got to my floor. And I looked at it and chuckled a little bit at the absurdity what was going on in there. I took a deep breath as I passed by. Once I did, I could hear the tone ring out and the doors open. Instinctively, I turned around to look to see who was exiting, but no one came out. Then I heard the alarm go off, signaling that someone was stopping the doors from closing. I thought, great, it's broken. Now I have to deal with repairman and dealing with the thing in there at the same time. I took a deep breath. Maybe I can fix it real quick, I thought. I walked over and could see one side of the doors due to the angle. I didn't see anything blocking the sensor, so I turned the corner and moved so I could see. Once I was fully in front of the doors, I could see that part of the fluid had indeed blocked the sensor, and only the sensor. I said, "What the hell?" as it just stayed there, keeping the doors open. I looked up, and the slime had come out of the wall. In the same amount of time it took me to examine the sensor, it had morphed into another female-shaped form. This one was not familiar to me. The body was much more streamlined and hourglass-shaped. The face was of the woman I'd caught in there before, the one I didn't know. It was still attached to the wall, but just barely. At once, again, raised its arms, and I began to take a step back. Suddenly, tendrils of fluid shot out from the walls and reached out for me. They began to wrap around my arms and legs. I was able to shake off the ones on my arms, but it got my legs. Without hesitation, I pulled my feet out from under me and began to pull me to the side. The humanoid portion seemed to simply stay put as the fluid continued to pull me towards it. The fluid began to get thick and almost rigid. I could feel the grasp of them getting tighter and tighter on me as I thrashed, trying to separate, to get free. I began to scream in fear as I reached out to grab anything to keep me from being pulled inside this thing's den or lair. Two female neighbors came out to see what was going on and froze as they could see me being dragged inside the elevator. They then saw another tendril reach out and wrap around my upper arms as I desperately tried to brace myself in the doorway. I kept screaming, "Help me!" as it began to overpower me. I was pulled waist deep at that point, kicking and screaming the entire way. The fluid had gotten up to my knees by this point and was reaching out with both hands, almost unable to keep myself from being pulled in all the way. With the pull of my upper arms, I lost my grip and I was pulled deeper in. Now it was just my fingertips keeping me from being consumed by this monstrosity. From the outside, I'm sure they watched as my fingers slowly lost their grip and I was pulled into the abyss. Once I lost my grip, it pulled me in violently, slamming the soles of my feet into the far wall. With that, the doors shut and I was alone, alone with it. I was facing up as more fluid shot out and grabbed both my arms, encapsulating both of them in a thick, viscous fluid that seemed to constantly get more and more solid by the second. The humanoid portion kneeled down, seemingly sat on its lower abdomen. I tried to fight, but it seemed to get thicker and heavier, as though it knew I wasn't strong enough to move with that much weight. By this time, the fluid had wrapped around my legs and gotten under my shoes and socks and had torn them to pieces from sheer outward pressure. The fluid was now going up my shorts and down from the humanoid portion on top of me. I could feel the pressure as my shorts and undergarments were effectively shredded as the fluid built up around me. The humanoid portion seemed to melt as if its legs portion began to flow up and around my torso, effectively lifting me off the floor. It had already flowed up my arms and now began to wrap itself around my neck. When it reached my chest, or I should say under my shirt, it hesitated. It could feel my heart beating so rapidly, maybe that scared it, at least for a few moments. Then it continued its assault up my body. When the fluids began to harden around my neck, the remaining humanoid portion leaned down, bringing its face to mine. All I could think at that point was, I'm gonna drown. Its arms were placed on either side of my head, and I could feel the fluid reaching from them and onto my head. It began to wrap around my ears as I began to thrash even more violently. At this point, fear had spiked my adrenaline to a previously unknown degree. The head of this thing was almost on my face when something happened. It spoke. It actually spoke. Sort of. The fluid on my ears vibrated, creating sounds, human vocal sounds. It was like a person trying to speak after a massive stroke or other head trauma. The sounds didn't make much sense, just random eh, la, ba, ke, we, and so on. I stopped and looked at it. The face it made had no expression as it spoke, almost like that of a mannequin. This made me temporarily forget that this thing was sucking all the hydration from my pores, at least what little bit I had. That is until it got tighter, a lot tighter. It squeezed my entire body and made the sounds louder. Ni, ki, il, si, lin, te. It was like it was looking for a response, like a child that desperately wanted attention from its parent, though this one could rip me apart in seconds if it wanted to. I tried to calm down and ask, Are you talking to me? This made it stop. The face was looking into my eyes with the same emotionless look, though it seemed to suddenly smooth out its texture and the sound of me talking to it. I turned my head slightly to get a better look, and it mirrored my actions. I smiled at this, and it must have felt this from the surge, as the sludge that had made itself into my face without me noticing. It gave me the same grin back. Creepy. I tried to raise my head to get closer, but it held me down. All this without me realizing that it had activated my biological response to stimulus. I realized this as the fluid began to move around me, not just where you think. It was as though this thing was trying to give me a full body massage and had another surprise I had not noticed. But this thing was surprisingly warm. I would put the temperature around 75 degrees Fahrenheit. As it moved, it spoke again with an ew, ing, alma. I said, What? And it responded, t. I must have had a shocked look on my face because it gave me a shocked look back. I quickly tried to think of something else when I heard the tone of the elevator. The creature raised its head as the outside doors opened, as I could see another humanoid being formed behind it. When the doors opened, it was one of the male tenants from the top floor. Turns out we were now on the ground floor. He saw the scene in front of him and yelled, What the fuck? I didn't see fear in his eyes, but I did see anger. In less than a second, he threw his coffee at the creature, and it landed on the creature's face, spraying coffee all over the face and the newly forming humanoid behind it. I could actually hear it scream in pain from the sludge that was next to my ears. Out of revenge, desperation, or just anger, it threw the only thing it had available at him: me. I crashed into him with such force that we didn't just hit, but tumbled down to the foyer. By the time I was able to look up, it had fully retracted into the walls again. As I got up, the guy began to yell at me. What the hell? What do you think you're doing? I should kick your ass for doing that. You're so fucked up. Are you listening to me, you bastard? When I got my composure, I looked at him. Though the same height, it was clear that he had never seen the inside of a gym. A quick grab of the neck and a simple takedown had me in the mount position above him in about a second. I looked him in the eyes and said, "Say one more word and we'll have to call the paramedics. Do you get me?" He tried to wiggle out and I moved my forearm into the paper cutter position. "Do you get me?" I asked again. He realized at this point I could shove his Adam's apple into his spine from that position if I wanted, so he just nodded. With that, I got up, walked to the elevator, hit the button, walked in, and had an uneventful ride to my floor. To my surprise, my keys were still where I had dropped them when I was grabbed and dragged in. I didn't care that my clothes had been destroyed at that point, but my neighbor had stuck her head back out when the elevator opened, and she definitely seemed to care that the majority of my clothing was either in tatters or non existent. I walked to my place, changed quickly, and grabbed a sports drink from the fridge. I walked to the elevator and had to wait for it to reach my floor. When it did, I was glad it was empty. I simply opened the bottle, placed it in the corner of the back wall, placed my hands against the wall, and said, "Sorry." Walking out, I looked back to see if it would come out. Turning back to my apartment, I simply said, "See you again soon."